Okay.
About the history of Moscow Art Theater. I would like to talk about that too, in terms of like studios, right?
Right. I'm poorly versed in the studios. I only know where the sixth
we'll
one.
have a quiz on that.
Oh no.
About the text itself,
Okay.
right? And then about you and the text.
Mm-hmm.
And a little bit about American Russian theater in general, because there is this whole debate about this thing. Okay, we're recording. So Nicole, hi. Have you ridden a Hungarian bus ever?
Have I been in a Hungarian bath?
Yeah.
Not specifically a Hungarian bath.
I mean Icarus. That one.
No. Icarus, a Hungarian bus.
Yeah.
I feel like I must have, because I've taken a lot of bus trips around Eastern Europe and Russia. So I must have been on an Icarus bus and not realized
But you're not
it.
certain about that yellow specific bus with the carousel in the middle?
That I know, because I've ridden plenty of like trolleybus and everything in Russia.
Okay.
And a lot of them. And here in New York now, they've got the new accordion buses as well.
Yeah, so
I think that, in my mind, imagining the situation that the character and probably the author Alexandra was in when she wrote the play, and maybe the walks that she took in her town, I had maybe a sort of gloomier Russian post-Soviet image of what this looked like. Buses that aren't as well kept, maybe.
Yeah.
But sort of a city with, it's a big road with no sidewalk, where it's a little more dangerous to walk on the street than maybe in New York. And definitely a feeling, and also in Russia when you're riding buses and you see, I always just remember these like more sort of unpaved paths coming to the highway from these far-flung apartment blocks, right?
Yeah.
And there'd just be some babushka walking with groceries from Metro to her apartment block so far away. It's like a very specific, those are like the images I had running through my mind, but what she talks about specifically.
But does it connect in any way to your experience, American life?
Well, in my experience, I connected it to growing up taking the subway to school and maybe not looking at the buses from the outside, but sitting across from people and wondering what those people were thinking, what kind of lives they had, wanting to connect with them in some way, in some real way, but also being shy because we're very close to each other in a very public place.
I see.
And this sort of whole drama you could create between yourself and a stranger across the aisle from each other was something that I also imagined, because I would have these very serious or big or wonderful thoughts about this person, and they have no idea who I am. I'm just some kid going to school.
Can you talk a little bit about the play, or it's not really a play, right? It's just a text. It's a monologue. How it came about, that you wanted to stage it, and
when my theater company and I, we were a group of Americans who studied in Russia. We graduated and decided that we were going to stay together and form an ensemble here and try to do Russian-style theater or Russian theater in the States. I found a website of a bunch of contemporary Russian plays that were translated by people like John Friedman, Yana Ross, Sasha Dugdale, and I just kind of held on to it. Too nervous, and a one-person show isn't an ensemble piece. It felt very not like something that I could sort of bring to my company to do. I was afraid. And then over the years I worked on a piece of it as a monologue for auditions, and I would just go back to it a couple times a year. I'd read it and be like, I want to do this, I want to do this. And then a couple of years ago I finally sent it to a director friend of mine and was like, is this a play? Is this something, or is it just something that I see and care about? And he said, no, it is. And that's when I first reached out to John Friedman. So that was already several years after I'd read it, about possibly doing the play, and he put me in touch with the playwright Alexandra, and we emailed back and forth a little bit about it. And then, life got in the way. The director moved to New Orleans. I went to Russia to do another project, and it became it didn't happen. It seemed a little closer to happening. We'd had some meetings. We talked about it. I had sort of delved into it in a more production standpoint more than I had before. And then when I got an email from John almost a year ago now, last November 2012, telling me that Alexandra had taken her own life, it was really sad and shocking, and I think spoke to the deeper currents of the play. There's something that the inherent sadness that I had felt but isn't really discussed in the piece. And I realized that, all of my fears or trepidations to doing something like that were really silly and kind of selfish or just silly. Like making a bigger deal of it than it really should have been.
Mm-hmm.
And I just decided to do it. I'm even sure that this whole bus, this entire Icarus, which was made by Hungarians in which you don't get sick very often. I mean, of course, unless you're going from one city to another, which means that all of these people on it are really sick. Yeah, that's for sure. All these people are just sick to their stomachs, and they're rolling along, and they're all looking at me. All of them. The whole bus, this entire Icarus, except for the bus driver, because he's too busy looking at the stoplights in the streets and stuff. But even he did glance at me just once. It's true, but he did glance. So they're all looking at me. Well, no.
No. It just seems that way to me. I was only sure about that when I was walking down the pavement there next to the road. But none of those people knew who I was. They were just looking out the window because they were interested to see what this other town looks like. And so when they were looking at me, they were looking at me as if they were looking at me. Because for them, I'm not me. I'm just somebody. But I was thinking that they know who I am and were looking at me because of that.
I'll walk through those skyways,
Well, they were looking at me all right, but it wasn't at me, all right? So what the hell were they looking at then, huh? What were they looking at then? Hey, knock that off! Knock that off, they're looking at me. Because I'm me, but to them I'm not me yet.
Why you chose this specific form?
Well, the play itself is very moving. There's a driving energy to it, and it's very clear. Even though there's a lot of tangents, and she never quite necessarily gets to a specific point. She's always moving forward. She's always searching. And when I first thought of the piece in a small theater or something where I would do it, I imagined her on a treadmill walking the whole time anyway, and I couldn't figure out how to make a treadmill that doesn't have the big thing in the front of it, and how to control the speed of it. So it seemed easier to just walk, and also more interesting to then also use the audience members as my castmates, as my ensemble, right? That feeling of, in school they always told us that your partner is your savior, right? So I was like, okay, well what if the audience is my partner, so I can have something more tangible to affect and do than just sort of entertain them with this story.
And how did you practice? How did you rehearse? And how long did you rehearse?
I kind of created a lot of these games in my head first. I imagined them, and then I asked my friends to come and meet me in the park. And the first few times it was just kind of me telling the story and talking about some of the ideas, and a good friend of mine helped me finesse a lot of the points, like where I run with the walkie-talkie. I kind of wanted to go into, so it was a very collaborative experience. in that way. I, had invited trusted friends and fellow theater people to
Right.
work with me and give me their thoughts about what worked and what didn't work.
And in terms of form, so in New York theater, so we have, of course, Broadway, we have off-Broadway, we have off-Broadway. And now in Brooklyn we have sight unspecific walk in the park.
Yeah, it's a big, there's a lot of it happening. There's a lot of theater now that is immersive or social experience theater. Takes theater that takes people out of the theater room space and puts them into an experience. I think that it works because it takes away your idea of what theater is supposed to be. And a lot of people come into a theater space, I think, expecting certain things, and there's a certain detachment. But when you take that safety blanket of the theater, of the seat, of the darkness away from them, you automatically become more vulnerable to experience, to feeling something, and to having an opinion, I think. So many people who don't go to the theater all the time are afraid of having an opinion. They're like, I don't know what that meant. Did I get it? I'm not smart enough. I didn't. And that's not at all what I think theater is. It is totally up to you. It is not your job as an audience member to intuit what I mean by this. It's for you to take from it what you will. Hopefully it's something.
Right. What you just said is very similar to what Peter Brook was saying. He said that he hates the premieres, that they kill the theater, and he wants to have people to get new experience. This is all what theater is about. So your form, it seems like it actually creates a real theater in this cold city. And cold, in terms of how well theater people feel themselves if they want to perform. Right?
Yeah.
Off Broadway kills everything else on site. So that was my about the studios. So I printed out the.
Because I don't know all of the studios by heart.
That's why I printed them out. So this is Wikipedia page,
nice.
right? Studios of Moscow Art Theater.
Are we on there?
You're there. You're Studio 6 Theater, the troupe founded by new American actors, pupils of Moscow Art Theater Studio. You're number 8, although you're Studio 6. Not all of them were had official number. First studio was called Studio on Povarskaya. It didn't have a number. Then the second one is the first studio, which was founded by Sulezhitsky. Do you know anything about Sulezhitsky?
Remind me.
So Sulezhitsky was Stanislavski's assistant, and he had actually, what his idea of theater is very similar to what you are doing. The Studio 6, I think, placed itself very well here in this list. Speaking of which, if you look at all of these studios, they resulted in real theaters with budget, with repertoire, etc. What about Studio 6? Can you talk about Studio 6 a little bit?
So we started because we were a group of actors who had studied with each other for 4 years, and that, the Russian school system and maybe the fact that we were foreigners in another land made us especially band together and very close. We didn't want to just part, and the system of being an actor, the situation of being an actor in New York and America is pretty scary. So we thought we should stay together and try to work in the way that we had learned to work over the last 4 years when we graduated. And we immediately got to do a workshop, a series of workshops in Cambridge, Massachusetts with Alexander Popov, who, with 3 wonderful directors, and then we went back to Russia and worked as an English language company there as we tried to drum
Where
up
in Russia?
support. In Moscow. We performed at the Teatr na Strasno. It was like we rented the theater. And then we came back to the States and we realized that we wanted to be we were Americans and we wanted to make theater in America for Americans, just in the way that we had learned how. And it's a hard place to do theater. It's like there's a lot of theater companies in New York, in America, and a lot of them are really good. And we did a lot of good things. Right out of the gate, we were in the Fringe Festival. We self-produced shows. We managed to get Sasha Marin from Montreal and Moscow. We knew to work with us as well as the years went on. And we did a lot of really great work. And it's the hardest part I think we found was the administrative part of running of being an arts organization is challenging, and we never had a great support team, like administratore, to like work. We always did it all ourselves, and that's hard when you're the actors, the producers, the fundraisers, and everything. And you know, we still exist. We worked in Moscow with the International Chekhov Theater Festival on a show with sound drama called Garadok, and that was really amazing. We performed in Russia twice and in Moldova, but that was great because we got to work with a production company that was really supported the work and was able to manage all of.
You mean the festival, the
Yeah.
Chekhov festival?
Exactly,
Right.
which managed all of the nuts and bolts. So we just had to go to rehearsal and show up at the show. And that's ideally what we would want to do. So now a lot of company members are kind of all over the place doing a lot of different projects as actors, as teachers, and other jobs completely. One of our members is a news reporter, upstate New York, Karen, and so I think we're in a place of recalibrating right now. Well, for I Am Me, I want to travel with it. I want to take it hopefully to Russia, possibly to Ekaterinburg, where Alexandra worked.
Are you gonna perform it in Russian?
Well,
English? How are you gonna do that?
I would do it in English probably. I have dreams of learning it in Russian, but I could do it. And I think there's parts, like the recorded parts could be in Russian, the parts where she speaks very specifically about, you know, I am me, but I'm not me to them, and all of that very kind of specific language about identity could be in Russian. And I also want to take it around the States, anywhere. It's just me in a backpack, so it's very easy to travel, and I think it can become a very personal piece for anyone in their town. You know, the one thing that's definitely they're going to connect to is the space, because it's where they're from, and it's hopefully we'll show it to them in a way that they haven't seen it either.
Yeah, actually, I live, across from Central Park, and I hope that you would bring it to the Central.
I might do a Central Park version too, for sure. Prospect Park will always be probably the most beautiful. But other than that, I'm working on a show with two of my colleagues that I've worked with Studio 6. They didn't study in Russia, but they've worked in Russia with me before, and we are working on a piece called Antebellum, which is a sort of portrait of three notorious and famed bad guys of antebellum New Orleans, pre-Civil War New Orleans. And we're going to be doing that in the Fringe Festival down there in November. And we're kind of created a new group called Gogol Annex, very influenced by our work that we did with Gogol in Studio 6 before, and those kind of bright characters and extremes and contrasts. And everything about him.
And another question I realized I wanted to ask you about the audience. So your form itself is not real theater. It's more a performative theater, or maybe even you could call it a performance, right?
Yes.
And performance requires you to interact with the audience. Did you find out something new about how the audience in the city, how they were reacting, how they received the performance?
Yeah, so to speak to also like another reason why I wanted to use the audience is I spoke earlier about how that, in school it was very much about, our training was very much about ensemble and working with your partner, and I was very interested to see if the kind of games or exercises we would play and do to get reactions and work in real time, moment to moment, with each other as actors, as ensemble mates in class, if that could translate into creating a connection with a stranger, an audience member that's there just for that day. If we could create a sense of group, of ensemble in that 40 minutes. And so a lot of the games and stuff I played and a lot of things I chose to do were to create and evoke actual responses and experiences that aren't necessarily attached to the script, but are real and happening in that moment, and that could be perceived by the other audience members who are watching it, and are certainly felt by the partner that I'm playing with. And I found that people are really nice and into it and not that scared. I was always afraid that I would be kind of putting it upon people to play with me, and everybody seemed really willing to play, excited, and totally would pick up the game. Oh, like, we're playing this game, I'm going to play it, and I'm going to play it as best as I can. And that became theater for the people that were watching, their friends that were there watching them. They became a live member, and it was exciting, and it was different every time. And that was what we're going for when we're actors, when we're training to be actors, right? It's the same ensemble every time, but we're trying to do something very specific, very real in that moment, that day. So this was that.
Can I ask you to read one?
По-русски?
No, not по-русски.
Okay, good. Although it's funny in Russian, I was just looking at it the other day, and it sounds great in Russian. I would love to do it in Russian, but I just...
А еще бывает как бы искусство и как бы не искусство. Так ты не назовешь это искусством, а если вдуматься, то точно искусство.
And then you have art that's like art, and art that isn't art. Art that you can't really call art until you stop and you think about it and you go, oh yeah, that's art.